Question 7. Looking back at your preliminary task, what do you feel you have learned in the progression to the full product?
I found that in my final product, in the progression and the research and planning stages, I was so much more organised than I was in my preliminary task, and I was able to set myself deadlines and manage my time really effectively, which gave me more opportunities to improve and reflect on my work as I was going along, which helped me get to the stage that I wanted to, and it also gave me opportunities to get feedback from other people to help my piece. I also found that I could use more professional ways of planning and in pre-production as well. I also found that it meant I had time to create release forms and health and safety forms and take recce shots, so I could really have everything I needed planned out.
I feel like action needs to be really fast, and you can do this successfully by cutting clips together so that the dialogue flows together. But in my preliminary task, when we did a story about a girl who's a bit rude to one of her friends, I didn't edit the clips close enough with the dialogue, so it didn't flow very well and it didn't seem as professional.
I decided to choose a genre for this task that was that I was very passionate about, and this allowed me to add in more conventions of the horror genre because I knew more about it, whereas when we did our preliminary task it was a very sort of broad, general, day-to-day sort of teen idea of a film, and I find that has harder conventions for me personally because I'm not as connected with that genre, and I found that I could be more creative with the horror genre because I was more passionate about it.
When we did our preliminary task, I didn't use intertitles, but I think that when I did use them in Red Cradle, it made it really effective. It gave a sense of that horror genre because I could edit them so they were in a certain pace and a certain colour scheme and a certain font, and it gave you straight away that the film you're about to watch is going to be a horror film. To make my product Red Cradle as professional as possible, I decided to use a company logo that was sort of an animation, and I thought with the use of colour and animation and font and sound as well, I could convey that horror genre before the intertitles as well. And I found that a lot of independent companies only focus on one genre, and that's obvious through their company logo, so that's what I've decided to do. When we did our preliminary task, it seemed quite plain and boring. We didn't have any intertitles, we didn't have any logo at the beginning, we just had it straight into the action, and it didn't really give you any information prior to watching it. And I also think that having a company logo gives your piece more of a professional look to it and connotes that horror theme, which is what I wanted to do. From my preliminary task, I learned that the lighting is always quite important, because I'm looking back at the video of that, although the editing wasn't as successful, the overall outcome of the picture looks more professional because there's natural lighting that isn't too bright and it's not too dark, and it was filmed in quite a good space in terms of lighting. Whereas looking at my finished product I've just made, on the second scene with the two women, is quite low lit, and that's not what I wanted to portray in that scene, but I had to work with what I had on the day, and I was working in a conservatory, therefore the natural lighting is what you're given, and the lighting just wasn't as effective, and it's quite dark on their faces, and I don't want nothing too bright in a horror film, but I did find that it was just too low lit, and it made it seem like you couldn't see the characters' expressions, which is what I want. I wanted it to look more realistic and like a normal day setting in a sort of an older house, so that didn't have to be low key lighting. I also think it's quite important to find the right space to film in, because I struggled finding where to film my Red Cradle piece, because I wanted a place that was quite desolate for the first scene, but then quite a naturalistic living room setting for the second scene. And when we did our preliminary task, it was easy because all we needed was a school. We could use our school common room quite easily. But where I recorded for Red Cradle, we were in a park, which was fine because there was a lot of open space, which meant I could make it look more desolate, but a lot of people were walking past and there were like loud banging sounds coming from far away, like field. But that was, I thought I could edit it out in the editing process, but I found it really difficult to edit out the sound without ruining the dialogue that was happening. So I think that a very important thing is to notice is where you're filming and like if you want any background sound or not. Also, looking back at my preliminary task, I've realised that I've made it more realistic in Red Cradle than I have in the other piece that I did, because I had more of a realistic setting with natural sounds, especially for this first scene. The first scene I did in Red Cradle, it was very, you had a bit of trees rustling in the background and birds, a little bit of bird sounds, but it wasn't too overwhelming, whereas when we did, when I did the other preliminary task, we didn't have any noise which you would hear in a school, and I had to try and use other sounds to make it sound like they're diegetic when there would actually be non-diegetic things that I've added in the editing process, which didn't come across as successfully. Looking back at my preliminary task, I used a lot of shot types that weren't very stylized. They were sort of just randomly, oh, I'm going to go from the side, but it was an awkward angle and it wasn't framed right. Whereas I found that when I was filming for Red Cradle, I had more of an eye for where I wanted it to be framed, how much room I want to have above the head, how much I want to have at the sides, whether I want her in the middle or to the sides, have an asymmetrical or symmetrical look to the picture. And I found that it looked less staged when I did it that way, because when I did it in the preliminary task, it looked like there's a camera here and there's a camera here. But when I did it in Red Cradle, I did it in very typical places. You'd put a camera and you'd film so that the shots worked with the dialogue and flowed with the piece. I also learned that pace is really important. I struggled a lot editing the preliminary task because I found that I couldn't find the right pace. But with Red Cradle, I started off with quite a fast pace, which I wanted, but then I struggled towards the end with the pace because I didn't want really slow pace, but I tried to find that balance because it was I wanted to show that you've got this little girl that's very like a worrying character and quite scary, and to build that tension. And then I wanted to show that there was like a worrying side to the next scene also, but it was calmer. They were just talking. They weren't the people that had the problem. It was the girl. And I don't think I showed enough contrast because I didn't have a different enough pace in the different clips.
In the future, I would ensure that I kept the same time management and the same organisation, keeping up with those deadlines, asking for feedback, but I would also change the way I filmed and would try and get more practice in terms of editing, to be more broad on my editing and be more outgoing instead of sticking with the more simple things. I'd like to branch out and try more unique ways of editing, and also find the right space and like be more professional in asking people, can I use this place to film, can I use here to film, instead of sticking with places that are easy for me to get hold of because that's the easiest for me. I would also maybe use more different actors, because I chose people that I was quite close to, but that wouldn't have given me the best result in terms of acting because they're not actors. Whereas if I chose people, for instance, even people that just took drama or as an A-level or have experience in acting, that might have been better for me, instead of just choosing people that I could get to easier to meet the deadlines. Overall, I'm really happy with my end product, Red Cradle. And I think that from the preliminary task I've improved a lot in terms of all areas: research, planning, pre-production, production, because in my preliminary task it just was very standard. We managed to film it very quickly, there wasn't much thought gone into it, whereas I really got my head into this piece and thought about it and put all my efforts into it and made it more creative because I was really passionate about it.